And in the mid 2010s, things started to go, really crazy, as we all know. And so I kind of was inspired to start thinking about how this happened because, on the normie left in the 2000s, things weren't by any means that crazy. And so I started thinking about questions of how, in particular, women's issues had been co-opted to sort of infantilize women. And I think that has always been a temptation, going all the way back to the 19th century. If you think about what I actually studied in academia originally, before I moved into just kind of teaching writing to, pay the bills and keep things rolling, was 19th century American literature. And, when you talk about that era and that type of literature, there's a ton of, women are feeling centered and they're virtuous and all that kind of stuff that happens around and sort of co-ops some of the earliest well-intentioned proto-feminist impulses. And so I kind of had that background coming in and then saw, oh, wow, we're really infantilizing women from the feminist vantage point today, in all kinds of respects. And I know you talk about that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, give us some idea of the ways in which we are infantilizing women from the feminist perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So, I think the idea, and Louise Perry's written quite a bit about this, I know you've spoken with her, the idea that you can biochemically alter everything about your relationship to sex and to motherhood in ways that are going to essentially make you function in the way men typically have. And that just has proven to be not as correct as we might have thought it was. But if you think about it, it's always been kind of a lie, right? That the idea that you're going to be able to have your cake and eat it too, the idea that there won't be trade-offs, that's not true in any aspect of life, right? And then sort of also, one thing I think about, I don't know if you saw the movie, your daughter's probably a little bit young for it, the movie Turning Red.
No, we won't let her watch
the Disney
that.
film. But yeah, so I haven't let my sons watch it either. It is, have you watched it? It is wild. So it's this idea that female self-expression is by definition virtuous, right? So the idea that the unfiltered expression of your rage, and this was sort of a big thing after Trump won the first time with the handmaids outfits and, all these types of things, the unfiltered and completely socially inappropriate expression of female rage is somehow good. Whereas we would never think that for male rage. In fact, we would think that it's abusive, bad, toxic, and in many cases, rightfully so. But the idea that we're going to hold women to sort of a lower standard because their feelings have the weight of virtue, this goes back to a really pretty unflattering idea of women as like childlike sacred vessels. And I think it's kind of been co-opted by an ostensibly progressive move to empower women.
Everything feels so crazy right now. It feels like, again, I really am interested in your take on Erika Kirk and this, there's lots of tweets going around that are like, this is kind of criticizing feminism and using her. And I'm interested to see how her ascent as the CEO of Turning Points is going to be welcomed by the quite, male-leaning audience that he cultivated, and oftentimes saying like, you have to submit, these kind of very common evangelical ways of speaking. What's your take on this moment right now with her on the right in particular?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, obviously, the grief and the weight of this time has implications that go so far beyond like the feminist conversation. But I think, so that obviously colors it to some extent, right? Like we're looking at a widow who just lost her husband in this heinous way with these two young children. And obviously that's the first lens we have to look through. But I think that our conversation about feminism has become so like meaningless, right? These labels almost mean nothing when they can mean everything. So on the one hand, right, there's a long history that goes back to like Phyllis Schlafly of women who are themselves professionally out there saying that women need to not be professionals. So that's, one sort of take that I think, Erika Kirk will be quite smart enough to avoid being slammed with the full weight of that. But I think that there's that impulse of people on the left then to say, hey, you're a hypocrite, right? But I also think that what unites trad wife impulse that a lot of the audience might be sympathetic to, and then the sort of progressive feminism that, if we're being honest, right? I mean, Erika Kirk was a professional woman before she got married. She had the choice to get married and to, put her career on hold and all these things. I mean, there's a lot that second wave feminism did to achieve that. And while it may have had premises that were absolutely false baked in, that doesn't mean that everything it achieved shouldn't have also been achieved a different way, right? Like we could have had different premises and achieve some of the same outcomes, which I think is what a lot of, I would say, sort of the conservative feminists, and I would not reject that label for myself. Like a lot of people like that sort of understand we need to be really pluralistic in how we look at women. Of course, there are going to be women who are called to work, called to mother, called to do both, called to do them at different times. This is a really evolving reality. And the stay at home, go to work, girl boss, trad wife, binary is really sort of antiquated and not helpful. So I think that if she can embody some degree of that pluralism, like, look, I'm called to do different things at different times. There are ways in which I prioritize my children. There are ways in which I prioritize my career. These things don't have to be all or nothing. I think the ratcheting down of our labels conversation would serve everyone. Because I don't know about you, I feel like the trad wife and the girl boss are sort of both these curated images that almost are themselves the work, if that makes sense, more than the actual work is.